Today on Diksha, we look at problems. Everyone has problems, and everyone's problems are relatable. Now, what I mean by relatable in this instance is that let's say a rich person and a poor person has money problems. But the money problem that a poor person will have is different than the money problems a rich person will have. And by rich, we mean financially well off. So it's relatable because we can call it altogether financial difficulty. But the poor person will not be able to understand a rich person's money issue, and a rich person might not be able to understand a poor person's money issue. So although we say they both have money problems, we are not speaking about the same thing. And so problems will vary even though we have grouped them into similar categories. So when I say that I have problems and another person says that they have problems, we are not necessarily speaking about the same thing, even though we are referring, as in my example, to money problems. So this is important to understand, that problems are relatable to each and every individual, although by the very nature of problems, everyone has them. And so this is where we say, for example, that this person that we observe doesn't have any problems or doesn't seem to have any problems. So the whole point I'm trying to make there in setting up the topic of problems is that it exists in nature. Problems exist in nature. It is part of life. It is part of life itself. And by life, I mean animals will have problems. Even the earth has problems. The solar system has problems. But because we do not relate those problems to ourselves, we do not consider these, let's say, other entities, other beings, to have problems. So in the same way that I, as a human being, would be worried about my future, animals will have to worry about their future, although they do not, let's say, they do not give off a sense of problematic existence that we can understand. When we do observe it, we realize that they have problems too. So for example, animals experience a problem when people are developing an area. They will have to lose their home. They are displaced. And so it goes on. That problems are a part of nature. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that as an individual, I give up? I say I relinquish all attempts to solving problems because problems will always be there. There will always be, let's say, something that can go wrong. And there's a famous, let's say, law of nature where it is stated that all things that can go wrong will go wrong. Now, we come to problem solving. So we have already established that problems exist. We have already established that it is universal. It is not something that is limited to human beings. It is something that exists as part of nature. And so we arrive at what we will call negative people, in the sense that negative people see problems. Everyone sees problems, but negative people only see problems. A negative person will only see the negative. Let's say they will recognize a problem, they will identify what is causing the problem, they will be able to state exactly what are all the effects of that problem. So they are very good at identifying a problem. But negative people are negative people because they do not see a solution. Now, what does this mean? Because problems always exist, even a solution will have a problem that accompanies it. And because a negative person only sees problems, they will only see a problem that even accompanies the solution. And because they only recognize problems, they will not even bother trying a solution because they recognize the problem with the solution. Because we as human beings tend to think that there is, let's say, a magic solution or a magic remedy for everything. That there is one remedy that will solve all problems. Without realizing that, well, problems always exist. And by always exist, I mean problems will continue to exist even though you have applied a solution. The negative person remains in a pessimistic state. They remain in a negative state because they constantly see and are constantly aware of the problem that exists and the problem that will follow a solution and the problem that will follow the solution to that solution. So this is a difference between negative people and positive people. The difference is that negative people will only see a problem and only see the problem with the solution. And so they will choose to not act. They will choose to not apply a solution. Positive people recognize problems. They recognize the inherent or the accompanying problem when you apply a solution. And so they devise a solution that will mitigate the current problem. So they will devise a solution that will make the current problem smaller or less complicated. And then when they are in another place, when they are in that space where you have a smaller problem compared to before, then they apply another solution that will make that problem smaller. And then in that situation with a smaller problem, they can apply another solution that will make that problem smaller. And so 10 steps ahead, they will have a problem that is 10 times smaller than the current problem or the first problem that they had to deal with. And so this is what, or the method, or the way that problem solvers operate. Because problem solvers are people who recognize the problem, just as people who are negative, but they also recognize the solution and they are not afraid, rather, to apply the solution because they have a solution for the accompanying problem and they have no fear or no hesitation in doing the work to solve that problem. And so there's a willingness to take on the work in order to solve a series of problems, one. And so they have escaped that one golden solution mentality where there's one fix that we want to apply that will solve all problems. Because problem solvers realize that the universe itself, nature itself, has problems. And I'm not talking about problems that they are trying to fix, but rather it is in nature that everything has a problem, that nothing is perfect. And that by design, every single problem has a natural and an accompanying solution. So this is the main dividing line between a negative person or a problematic person and a positive person or a problem solver. It is not that problem solvers don't see problems or that they are inherently positive people. Problem solvers merely have the same ability that negative people have, which is to identify a problem. But there's a certain lack of fear and there's a willingness to do work, because work is needed to apply a series of solutions to a series of problems. So what I am pointing out here is not something that is inherently difficult. It is not something that is, let's say, impossible to the majority of us. What I am pointing out here is, let's say, well, in a short word, laziness compared to hardworking, where hardworking people tend to be successful not because they have some gift or they have a certain amount of inside information or they have a certain level of intelligence that is beyond unsuccessful people. It is really that hardworking people and eventually successful people are willing to apply solution after solution in an effort to solve ongoing problems. And people who are, well, lazy for a short word, but people who are less, let's say, industrious, people who are stuck with a mentality of one solution fix all, these people tend to be failures or less successful simply because they are least willing to try solution after solution that meet every single problem that accompanies the solution. Now, there must be an understanding here that there is never, let's say, an ultimate point where problems are solved, that all problems are solved. Because like I stated before in our discussion, problems exist as part of nature. It is something that accompanies a solution. So there's never, let's say, a situation without a problem. And even if we look at it, even in the most perfect of scenarios that we can imagine for ourselves, we can still think of a way to make it better. And that way is, let's say, a problem and a solution. So there's always a way to improve. There's always a way to become better. Now, we have been taught, or let's say led to believe, that we must be complacent and must accept what is given to us or what is in front of us. But we all know our own emotions and we all know our own feelings. And even when we are in a situation where we must, because of circumstance, we must accept the circumstances or we must accept the problems, we as individuals are not satisfied or happy in being in that situation. We are not satisfied in that scenario. And so we, let's say, long or dream or desire, we have wishes, we have prayers that we would like the current situation or the current problem to be solved or mitigated or at least made less uncomfortable. So we must realize that as human beings, it is not in our nature to accept the current situation, no matter how comfortable it may be. We naturally desire for it to be better. And so, as I come to the conclusion of today's episode, today's topic being negative people versus, well, positive people, or let's say problematic people versus problem solvers, the key dividing line between a problem solver and a person who, let's say, only sees the negative is the ability or the willingness to apply solution after solution, or the ability or the willingness to work on a solution. So like always, I'd like to thank you for joining me on Diksha, right here on Sankhya Television, the first Hindu TV station in Trinidad and Tobago, and your number one choice for inspirational, cultural, and spiritual programming.